Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is a very, very rare Kawasaki Ninja. This is the ZX-4R, not the ZX-4RR, and I'm filming here in Canada at Jim Gilbert's Power Sports, the #1 volume Kawasaki dealer in the country. And this bike is not actually sold worldwide, but it might be the better bike for you, and it's certainly a great value. So let's talk about this bike in detail. But if you're interested in anything Kawasaki or anything really motorcycle-wise, make sure you do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, because I review these things all the time, this thing. And if you want to know something that I don't cover in this video, or I haven't covered in other videos on other motorcycles and other power sports stuff, make sure you subscribe and let me know in the comments below the types of things you want to know, because I will come back to these things again and again and again to make sure that you have all the information you need on video, and I'll do my best to answer as many comments as I can as well. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to talk about what makes this bike great and what separates it a little bit from the ZX-4RR, and how you could make it exactly what you want it to be, because there are accessories available, especially one key accessory that I like to have on this bike. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about if it's right for you. So let's start at the front, work our way back, talk about every single detail, and then we'll finish off with helping you decide if it's best for you. So first, let's set the stage for what this bike is. This is now the lowest displacement Ninja you can buy. Now, there may still be some Ninja 400s around that are 399cc. This is also 399cc, and the new Ninja 400 became the Ninja 500, which is 451cc, which makes this lowest displacement Ninja you can buy for 2024 and moving into 2025. So this one is actually a 4-cylinder, and that, along with a number of other features on this, actually make it a super sport bike, but a smaller super sport bike. So instead of the Ninja 636, this is the ZX-4, and this one is a 4-cylinder, 399cc with a whole bunch of tweaks that make it a little bit more track friendly and certainly higher spec, but also having an engine that is quite powerful, super high revving, but also something that is a little bit more approachable. And frankly, it's the super bike that I would buy, because most of my super bike riding is going to be on the road. And I think if you're leaning towards more road use than track use, this 4R instead of the 4RR may make a difference as well. So we're going to talk about all those details. Let's start at the front, and we'll start showing you some of these higher level components on this bike. So if you've seen my reviews before, you know I love to start at the front wheel, because it gives you an idea of what this is all about, what this bike is all about. And again, this is a more entry-level super sport bike, but it's still above the regular street sport bike. So you're seeing a number of high-end components. First thing you see is the upside-down suspension here. Now, one of the key differences between the 4R and the 4RR is that this suspension is non-adjustable. So if you're one of those people who rides a super sport bike or has a bike with adjustable suspension and doesn't adjust it that much, or doesn't adjust it at all, or have messed up your adjustments and have to go back to your owner's manual to get them back to factory again, if you don't like messing with your suspension, this is what to get, because it's still high-end components here inside, and that's what really matters to having a bike that rides great. Not the low-end budget stuff, high-end suspension. The real difference in this bike is that it really has a super sport feel with a little bit less powerful engine. So you still have high-end upside-down forks here. You also have some high-end brakes. So the dual discs, the regular Ninja 500 has a single disc. This one's dual disc, well vented, and you have the ABS ring right there. You have ABS and a fancy traction control. We'll talk about that, and actually a fancier ABS as well. But you also have the radial mount calipers here, so you have a stronger mounting position here. Now that does a couple things for you. It gives you extra stiffness, so does the upside down forks, gives you extra stiffness up top and less flexing, but it also gives you more options for upgrade that are higher end upgrades. So if you ever wanted to take this, and just make it an outlandish kind of bike, you have everything in place to just make piece by piece upgrades without having to do crazy things with it. So really good suspension, really good brakes, but again, not the adjustable suspension that you get on the RR. And then the tires are decent. You can, because they are regular sport bike sizes, you can do a lot with them to change them, but they are more street sport than track sport. So again, this is a bit more street oriented super sport bike than the track level RR. So taking a look at the heart of this bike, this is where the engine sits, and this is what makes it unique. Now, of course, there's not a lot of engine to see in here. It's all hidden behind the bodywork. This is a true super sport bike. So the 4-cylinder engine is the key to this bike. Now, there is a bit of a controversy because they limit the power to around 11,000 RPM, even though you can rev it right up. We'll check the spec. I think it's like 16,000 RPM or something like that. We'll check that when we get to the dash. But the point with this engine is, now they limit it for, they say for noise regulation, so you have the option yourself of chipping this thing out, and which is a pretty common thing that people do, because in other areas of the world they give you full power. Now, whether you get the full power or not, you still have something that revs extremely high and is true super sport-like. So not a lot of torque, but a lot of horsepower up high in the revs. And it's an absolute blast to drive in those higher revs. And of course, because this is lower displacement, you can keep it in the higher revs more often, and everything feels exactly like it would on a bigger super sport bike, but you're doing all those things at a little bit lower speeds. So very small pistons traveling very short distances means they can rev forever and still be reliable. And again, there's not many 4-cylinder small displacement bikes out there on the market, and there used to be, but now this is really the sort of the king of that. Now you end up with some pieces in here that are super sport like, but you end up with a steel frame here. You can see sort of this sort of super sport style design. It is very compact, so the whole idea of this bike is to push everything compact, push it all forward, put the weight in the right place so that you have a great handling bike, number one, with this power plant, and it really is a good handling bike. So when you talk about a bike that's designed for great handling, you have to have a more aggressive riding position. It's just the way things work. So you have to find that balance, because this is a bike that is, again, street oriented as well. So if you take it on the street, you're going to want it to be comfortable. If you take it on the track or into a full sporty kind of riding environment, you're going to want to have it aggressive. So what this one is it's less aggressive than something like the 636, something like the ZX-10 and the ZX-6. So what you end up with is something that is a little bit more upright, but it still has that flat, narrow tank that allows you to get right into that tuck position, tuck your chest right down. And for me, it doesn't have any issues with elbows and knees interacting here. And you can see how tight it all is. So what you're doing is getting into an aerodynamic position where you don't have limbs sticking out everywhere, and you have very high foot pegs. Now I say very high, they're not uncomfortable for me at all, but those high foot pegs allow for really leaned over cornering, unlike something like a more beginner level bike, which is going to have a little bit more comfort seating position, a little bit more upright, and that's going to cause you to have not quite the same cornering clearance as you would on a bike like this. So you have that full super sport experience, but for a super sport, this bike is actually fairly comfortable. It's quite comfortable for me. I'm around 6 feet tall. Easily, I'm putting my feet on the ground here, so it's not a crazy high seat. Some super sport seats are fairly tall. They place your rear end up high in order to get your front down low. And again, that's all great for aerodynamics, but less great for comfort. So again, good comfort here, but also a nice compact riding position that's keeping your weight where the bike needs it to have that great handling, and allowing you to tuck in place, keep your elbows and knees nice and tight in, and keep that aerodynamic feel and that centralized position of gravity where nothing's flailing around, nothing's moving, and you can be really steady and smooth through corners. So as a super sport bike, you don't really focus too much on the passenger, and especially on a smaller super sport bike. It's not something they're terribly worried about, but you do have the ability to take one here. So you've got the foot pegs down low. You can kind of see one on the far side right there. And then you've also got the seat here. Now, just having this allows you to have some practicality. This pops off. There's a lot of bags that fit on there or underneath there, secure underneath there. So you do have the ability to, take a tail bag or something like that, take a tank bag. One of the things that they do make a little exception for here is if you don't do a tail tidy on this, you do have hooks right here, and then you also have a hook down on your foot pegs, or just beyond your foot pegs. For the rear foot pegs, you have a place there. So you can put a bungee net on there or something like that, or some sort of tie downs there to secure your lunch or your shoes or your gym bag or whatever you want. So you can use this as an everyday bike as well, that allows you a little bit extra practicality. Taking a look at the front of this bike, you're going to see a few differences, even just from the Ninja 500. So again, the 500 isn't at all in this class, in my opinion. Some people will say displacement-wise it is. We can have that battle, but in my opinion it's not. You're going to notice a much narrower windshield here. The 500 SE has more of a touring or sport touring type windshield. The regular Ninja 500, a little bit smaller windshield, but this one, again, built into the bodywork, as small as can be. You're not really looking through here. It's really just sort of a gauge cluster protector. It does give you a little bit of view there if you get in a full tuck down there in that windshield. So you have that, and then of course you have the quality LED lights. A lot of Kawasaki's in the past used to only light the low beam, and then you had to do high beam on this side. Of course, LED lights, they're both lit, and then you've got your high beams down there as well. So quality lighting here, but we're gonna turn those off and we're gonna zoom in a little bit here. You can kind of see it pretty clearly, but there is a ram air system here. That's gonna take air in, direct it through the bodywork right towards the engine. It actually does increase. So you see this a lot on super sport bikes where they wanna put in the center at the front where you get the highest air pressure. They wanna direct that air into the engine, and super sport bikes have that, and this one does as well. So we're gonna show you sort of the continuation of where that air goes through on the other side here as we start taking a look at the dash and the gauges. So before we take a look at the actual dash, I want to show you sort of the rider's area here. The first thing we'll show you is we'll continue on what we were talking about just a second ago. We're going to zoom right in here, and you can see that ram air system. So now that you see that, as we zoom back out a little bit further, zoom back out a little bit more, you can see how the bodywork takes it around the bike in towards the engine. So the bodywork is actually a piece of the ram air system here, which is actually kind of an interesting way of doing things. And then, of course, you can see these gold top fork tubes. These say Showa SFFP SFFBP. So again, you have those quality components in there, and that's a really key piece to having a good sport bike, something that really handles well and feels well. The difference with this one and the ZX-4RR, this was a 4R, this is the 4. The 4RR is the one with the adjustable suspension. This is just the single R, and there's no adjustments here. So you still have those high-end components, and that to me is a big piece. Like I said, still gonna give you great cornering clearance. At this point, when you have this quality of spec, the adjustments are only gonna save you just little tiny bits of time on a track, and you really gotta know what you're doing to get quicker, because you can make yourself quicker in one corner and slower in 5 others. But these ones here, of course, you start with a spec, you can get to know the bike exactly as it is. You're not changing anything. It's going to feel the same way every single time. So high-end forks are a really key piece of this. But like I said, if you want the adjustable, you move over to the 4RR. Now there's a couple other things I want to show you here. We'll just sort of change the angle around and show you the dash and the controls. All right, so taking a look at the dash here, we've got it in the sort of lighter color. You can also invert the colors, so you have this would be black and the speedometer, the 0 there would be white, so you can invert those colors if you want to. I tend to like it in the black, but I'm gonna film it in the white because I often film these in the black. So you've got a lot going on here. First of all, it was, like I said earlier, that 16,000 RPM red line. That's a huge red line. Again, this one's gonna rev up to about 11,000 and sort of flatline the power from 11 to 16,000, but it still makes great noise. A lot of people are gonna get this chipped, and that basically takes the onus off of Kawasaki. If you go above noise regulations in your area, that is your problem, not Kawasaki's, because you've modified the bike. So just something to keep in mind. It's a thing they do. We can talk about that. I'm sure other videos have talked about it. If you have questions about that, we'll talk about that later. But what you have here that's a little bit unique, especially in a bike of this displacement, but is very common for a super sport bike, is you have riding modes. So the riding modes can change and do change the power level of this bike as well. So let's just cycle through them. We're at Sport, which is sort of the top of the line, which puts you in the into that sport mode, everything full power. Come down, you've got road, so that still makes full power, but the throttle is going to be a little bit less aggressive as the comes on, that kind of thing. Keep coming down from there, and you've got into the rain mode. And if we cycle through there even further, you have rider mode. And in the rider mode here, you can see that currently it's saved in full power here, and the traction control settings are there. So full power and low power traction control, there's several traction control settings as well. And that's where you can customize. You can make it maybe full power but no traction control, or you can make it less power. So there's all sorts of ways to customize this up, which is what you would want on a track bike. Sometimes on a track, you don't want any traction control. I always like to have the traction control at least on level 1, but again, it really depends, right? I've got a 950cc bike with more horsepower and a lot more torque than this, so I like having the security of a little bit extra traction control. Something like this, not a ton of torque and all horsepower, maybe you want to take that traction control off at the track and allow that wheel to potentially move. Gear indicators right there as well. You also have a lap mode, so you can do various lap timers and that kind of thing. And there's a number of features that you can cycle through. We'll just go back to the road mode here in a second as we come back up. So rain mode I could have done as well, but we'll go in road. So you see the trip A up there, trip A, trip B, you've got the odometer, and then on the back side, the bottom side there, you've got, we'll do range in kilometers. So that's once you start moving, it'll tell you the approximate kilometers left based on how you're driving. and average speed, total time. Average speed is something that's not on every Kawasaki. Total time, the battery voltage, the kilometers per liter, which can be liters per 100 kilometer. It can be miles per gallon US, miles per gallon UK, all that's in there. So that is your instant fuel efficiency. It's also the same figure for your average fuel efficiency. You can set that up for whatever thing you need, and then we're back to the range there. So lots of options in there. Fuel gauge on the side, clock's always visible. Nice things to have. So taking a look at the controls here, you have that lap timer in there. We haven't showed you that in the dash. It'll be, if you need to see that and you want to see that, we'll do another video on that. We'll do a sort of a full dash display on this one. So let me know in the comments if that's something you want to see. But what I was doing to switch through the ride modes was holding this down. So it starts at the bottom with rider mode, then you can move your up through rain, road, and sport. And then you hold this down to go back the other way through all of those options again. And when I just tapped these, they moved the odometer, and this one was moving those things like the range, the battery voltage, that kind of thing. So tapping this does the bottom display, tapping this does the sort of next up display, but holding it switches your ride mode. So that's just something to have in there. And again, you can switch your traction control and all those kinds of things. You do have a flash to pass button right here that's hard to see. That does your high beams. Then you have your lock your high beams on, low beams, signal, horn, and four-way flashers are nice to have. Hazard lights there, nice to have. And then on the other side, you have a little bit extra pieces as well. So we'll show you that. So again, separating itself from the street sport lineup, you end up with something that the only street sport bike in the Ninja lineup is the Ninja 1000 SX that has this level of control. So normally you have a kill switch, a separate start switch, and then no switch here, or maybe a start switch. This is the select switch. That's part of selecting in that dash. Again, doing the dash video would be an entire other video. We can show you that if that's what you want to see. But your kill switch and start switch is all the same switch up here. So again, this is the same basic control as on something like the Ninja 1000 SX. So again, all higher end components. Taking a look at the clutch side, there's a few things we've got to talk about here. First of all, the clutch is slipper and assist, and it's a very light clutch, nice and easy to pull. You do have the adjustments here, so there's 5 adjustments there. So adjustments for reach, so number 5 is I think the shortest reach there. We'll put on number 1, yeah, that's the furthest reach there. So basically about a knuckle to a knuckle on my hands there. I like to have it somewhere in the middle there, but the big point of these is not just that they're adjustable for different size hands. You can adjust that grab point to be exactly where you want it to be. And that's super helpful because you can do the same thing on your brake lever. So brake lever, clutch lever, both have adjustments and you can adjust them where you want to be. Now, this is a slipper and assist clutch, so that means that it's lighter pull. And also if you mess up downshift or do a really aggressive downshift on the track, it's going to try to prevent your rear wheel from sliding around because it's going to let the clutch slip instead. So you get the benefit of a lighter clutch pull, you get the benefit of being able to make aggressive downshifts without having the rear wheel risk slipping as much. So that's really nice to have. But you do have to use the clutch with every shift on this. Let's talk about one of those differences. So the key difference between the ZX-4R and the ZX-4RR is suspension, paint, and the quick shifter. Now the quick shifter is something that you actually can add through Kawasaki's accessories. And if it was me, that's what I would want. As much as I like adjustable suspension, part of the reason I like adjustable suspension is because it gives me higher level suspension. If I had this higher level suspension, I'd probably be fine with just that. However, the quick shifter on a bike that you're going to be shifting a bunch and going to be, you know, keeping in that power band, to me is something that's going to make you faster. It's going to add to the experience. It gives you that super sport experience. So this bike can be had as sits without the quick shifter, without the adjustable suspension. You're not gonna swap out this suspension for the adjustable suspension of the other one. That's gonna be too costly. Just buy the other bike, buy the RR. But the quick shifter to me is a worthwhile accessory that still allows this bike to be cheaper than the RR, and you can add it as an accessory from even labor included and part included. You can add it and be cheaper than the ZX-4RR. So then what you have is something that looks like just a regular sport bike with a quick shifter, screaming engine, lots of fun, and to me, that's the way to equip this bike, but it will depend on what you want. One of the benefits of this bike is it's going to make you a better rider because you're going to be shifting more often and needing to shift more often. You're going to be used to making clean, crisp shifts. Because you're going to feel everything, it's a fairly lightweight bike. You're going to be coming into corners and coming out of corners. Momentum is going to be the key when you haven't got 200 horsepower to pull you out of corners and make up for your mistakes. So one of the things that this bike does, it gives you more thrills than something like a Ninja 500. It gives you much higher level components all the way through, so you can really have a lot of fun, but you're not going to be so far beyond the speed limit that you can't learn to be a great sport rider on the road. And that's where this one really comes in handy. So this is my favorite super sport bike. I would equip it with the quick shifter. I don't need the adjustable suspension. I might save some money and buy this one, especially since it's sitting right here on the floor, and this bike is pretty rare and hard to find. This one and the RR are still kind of hard to find. So this is how I would equip this bike, exactly as is, with the quick shifter. And there's your super sport bike. Great to learn on. I don't think you're gonna get too tired of it. I think it's got all the power you need, especially if you're staying on the street or if you wanna get competitive on the track. These bikes can keep up with bigger bikes because some of these riders get to know this bike really, really well, whereas other riders rely on the power, you're gonna rely on some skill, and that's what this bike is great for. So there is my review of the ZX-4R, not the ZX-4RR. If you want to see more of these bikes, make sure you let me know. And again, filming here at Jim Gilbert's Power Sports, the #1 volume Kawasaki dealer in the country. If you're looking for a Kawasaki, they've got them here. This one's in stock beginning of September 2024, so this is still 2024 model. We'll cover the 25s as they come in as well, but great time to pick up this bike at the end of the season and have it ready to go for, still got a few riding months left, and then you have it next season as well. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you in the next one.